Surprise, surprise! After years of the media reporting that the sales of electric vehicles, and specifically Tesla, is falling off the cliff, now comes new research that the exact opposite is happening. Turns out, EVs are still booming for most US automakers. New research from Cox Automotive shows that despite a flat year, the US sales of fully electric vehicles will soar to 2.5 million by 2025, up from 1.1 last year. Bloomberg does their best to highlight how Tesla's growth has slowed by 13%, but they then wait to the last minute to show how Tesla is still the only high-volume EV maker and is about to blow everyone out of the water with Robotaxi, new affordable models, and the ramp of the Cybertruck. So today I've got Brian White joining us. He's the host of his incredible YouTube channel called FutureAza. He's really upgraded the channel, got so many incredible videos on there, deep dives. Thank you so much, Brian.
Herbert, it is a delight to be back in town and to be on your channel in person, as sort of.
Sort of in person. I love that you go travel and you do this quite a bit, much more than most of us. You went to Europe, you went to the takeover event, and really was on the ground and interviewing all the people that are Tesla fans out there. So let's talk about US EV sales, what's actually happening. This is the article from Bloomberg. The slowdown in US electric vehicle sales looks more like a blip. Wow. Oh boy, EV sales are still booming for most automakers, even if Tesla is in a rut. You know what I mean? They'll do what they can. But you'll see later that it's actually kind of true, but not true in the way they position it. So I just went and straight out started with this graph because it tells most of the story. You know, analysts see growth resuming for fully electric cars. This is the research from Bloomberg. You got IAEA and the Bloomberg NEF. So you see that the green is fully electric vehicles, and this is trailing 12 months, and it's continued to grow, and it looks very much like an exponential curve. Now, just because there was a blip here where it went flat, it's cyclical. We're talking about automotive industry. It's it's affected by the interest rates. But if you look at the forecasts for both BNF and IEA are still quite high, and we're talking about going up to the 2.2 by 2025. I'll pause here for a second. Any comments on this?
Of course. So in that headline, Bloomberg knows that there's no PR department that's going to push back when you say little dumb things. So they say little dumb things all the time, and they know better, but they know what they're doing, and they're selling clicks. And that's how you sell clicks, is by being sensational, especially if you're not going to get called out. If you look at those numbers, you saw, it's flat. It's flat, you guys. It's over. But if you go back to 2018, you'll see that it was actually shrinking. The market was actually shrinking. Why is that? It wasn't. It was regrouping for the next wave of growth. We were seeing a lot of manufacturers who had made some compliance vehicles who were stepping back from those compliance vehicles to make real vehicles. They didn't want to focus on both. You can't focus on both. So things like the Ford Focus is a good example. They stopped making them and said, okay, we're going to regroup. We're going to make something that people actually want, that's actually compelling, like the Mach-E and the Lightning. Now those sales are online. And if this was just a Tesla situation, if Tesla was still the only real game in town, this could be a concern. But we've been told for years that the competition is coming, and it looks like, at least in some regards, it has arrived. Kia, Hyundai, Volkswagen, Porsche, Polestar. There are a lot of EVs out there. So you don't have to like Daddy Bad Tweet. Elon himself can be the absolute devil in your opinion, and people can still find cars that they like and keep the adoption curve moving.
Yeah. As we try to remind everybody, what matters is not the market share against other electric vehicles. It's whether or not electric vehicles are growing in terms of ICE vehicle gas cars. And is Tesla growing against gas cars? And it's great that other cars, because it's just going to happen. That's the way it works with whenever there's kind of a new revolutionary product. So let's take a look at more of this article. And they start off by saying, so after an underwhelming start of the year for U.S. electric vehicle sales, it might seem easy to conclude that the boom times are over. Sales were flat in the first quarter, Ford dramatically scaled back expansion plans, and Tesla laid off 10% of its global workforce. These dismal indicators only tell part of the story.
I'll
Sorry.
say, I mean, that's an understatement of the century. You know, it wasn't that long ago Google laid off 10%. Search is over. The internet has come to an end. Get real.
I just find it funny because this is exactly what we've been saying over and over and over again, and Bloomberg and others say the exact opposite. And now they come back and say this. Okay.
And again, it's not that Ford is dramatically scaling back.
Yeah.
It's that they're regrouping. The F-150 Lightning is a fantastic truck, but it's too expensive to build. And they've long said, we're going to make a clean sheet design for the next F-150 electric. And that appears to be what they're doing. If the truck is too expensive to sell at volume, they need to make a different truck. And that appears to be where they're at. This doesn't, you know, we know Ford has a Skunk Works division that's working on a line of new cars, and it starts with what is the underlying philosophy of the construction, of the manufacturing process. And that's where they're at. I have confidence that Ford and GM are going to move forward into the future because no amount of protectionist legislation in the US is going to save them in international markets where they are still big players.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And so they still really well position Tesla as suffering when that's not exactly the case. So they go for every sign of an EV slowdown. Another suggests an adolescent industry on the verge of its next growth spurt. In fact, for most automakers, even the first quarter was a blockbuster. Wow. So they then try to say that 6 of the 10 biggest EV makers in the US saw sales growth at a scorching pace compared to a year ago, up anywhere from 56% at Hyundai Kia to 86% at Ford. A sampling of April sales similarly came in hot. So we're still seeing growth in demand, just not the same pace for every brand. Okay, finally saying it. Right now, Tesla doesn't have new models. Ford doesn't have a lot in the pipeline, but Hyundai, BMW, Kia, Cadillac, they're really moving the needle forward. And then this is a bit of it's a misleading table, but it's just one way to look at things. So if you compare Tesla or the brands against what they were doing the year before in that same quarter, in the first quarter sales, you see that Tesla fell, and they'll say the 13%, GM fell, and Volkswagen fell, but everybody else grew. Okay. Now, obviously, this is very misleading because, we'll show you why, but it's a tale of two EV markets. Consumers are flocking to some brands in record numbers. They're turning their backs on those with inferior battery range. Tesla has inferior battery range. Tesla has lower charging. Tesla has higher prices. Delays of new vehicles, though, temporary added to perception market running out of steam. And this is kind of at least put it in perspective. Okay, so yes, Tesla fell by 13%, but look at these numbers, right? They're compared to everyone else who grew 56% growth. It's like 8,000 vehicles and 9,000 vehicles. And, these are just small numbers. So tiny compared to how many sales Tesla did in a difficult year. But what's your thoughts on all this?
So that chart is a good example of what James Stevenson would call a chart crime. Yes, Toyota had massive growth because people don't want slow charging underpowered EVs like the Toyota BZ4X. Come on, guys. That is the epitome of what you just described. So if we look at it, if you sold 2 cars last quarter and you sold 3 cars this quarter, you're up 50%. When Hummer came out, the first quarter they sold, I don't remember, 2 vehicles, 3, maybe 5. And then the next quarter they sold hundreds. And if they continue growing at this pace, by the end of 2028, they'll have consumed every atom in the known universe. So that's ridiculous. Growing by 50% when you're selling no cars, when it's less than 1% of your entire fleet, is not as meaningful. So it's going to be interesting to see how they spin it in coming quarters. But the overall theme to me is EV adoption is up. Some people were just waiting for choices. Some people are brand loyal and will only buy a Toyota or a GM or a Ford. And now they have reasonable choices. I would argue they're still not the best for the money, but it's not up to me to choose what other people buy.
Sure it is. It is up to you. So Tesla's still the only high volume EV maker. So this is a great graph. Cox Automotive, not Bloomberg. This is Cox, right? They had to take their graph. So they show that, it's really the only EV maker. So I'm not dunking on these other guys. They are great. I just dunking on media who try to position things. If you just do it the right way, I'm glad these guys are doing really well. I want them to do better. I don't want them to suffer. I want them to have, the question now is profitability. This is sales. Another question is, can they sell them at profitable? And the problem is you need to get to this level of, this is the quarter, right? In a year, they need to get about 100,000. If you can get to 100,000, actually, what's the number? Is it 20,000? Like, I think it's, it's 200,000 is the number. Once you get to 200,000, then your manufacturing can really get to scale, and you can really start to save money and then flip the profitability. Correct?
Well, and the real truth is there's every step along the way. Every order of magnitude brings you substantial savings. So even getting from 1,000 of production to 10,000 gets you different pricing, to 100,000 to 1,000,000. Every time you step up significantly from the original number, you're going to see huge savings. And these companies need this. GM and Ford and really all of these guys are volume leaders. If the F-150 was a truck that they only made in the kind of numbers we see for the Lightning, they would probably lose the same kind of money. So they need to get all the pieces in place. And the problem is it's not just, like asking a Swiss watchmaker to start making little digital watches. If they have to invent every piece of that digital watch, it's going to take them forever and cost a fortune. And that's what we're seeing, is nobody wants to just buy someone else's whole package. It surprises me that nobody has approached Tesla in a meaningful way and said, let me just get my drivetrain from you. Tesla used to make the RAV4, the Mercedes B-Class, I think, and there was one other, but they would, the little smart car. Tesla electrified all of those, but not in a way that was large scale and reproducible. So they would need to, but the fact that everyone wants to reinvent their own system strikes me as foolish and expensive.
I think that it's very likely it's the first thing they need to try. Do it ourselves, see if we can do it ourselves. And then if they stumble, then we can look for partners. I once showed this analysis that there's a path that specifically automakers would follow that they've done in the past. Do it ourselves, do it as consortium, partner with other automakers who are struggling, go to the Chinese low-cost leaders, and then they'll go to Tesla. That's what will happen. We'll see that eventually.
That would not surprise me at all.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the final parts of this article. They talk about, and for all the talk of an EV slowdown, many long-term forecasts haven't budged. In April, the IEA estimated that U.S. sales of fully electric vehicles will soar to 2.5 million in 2025 from 1.1 million last year. That's going to be doubling in just a year and a bit, 2 years. So in 2 years. So that sure sounds like, this is the same graph I showed at the very beginning, exponential curve. So this is very likely what's going to happen. This is what we see. This is the U.S. So if you look at what's happened in all the other countries, the U.S. just hit the 5% mark of all new sales are Tesla are electric vehicles, and they're now at 8 or 9%. But it's taken them longer than other countries, 3 to 4 years. We're heading to the 4th or 5th year. But other countries, once they hit the 5% mark, they skyrocket up to 15%. And of course, China's leading the way. So it's, even though we're just looking at the US, right? What's going to happen in the US? But you look globally, this exponential curve is even more profound.
Our curve may be a little slower because of the effective ban on Chinese imports. So that would make it difficult to hit some of the sharper edges of that S-curve. But there are still, we've got cars coming from Korea, from Japan, from Europe, of course, from the US, that will help make it happen. So it is happening. Butts in seats is the one thing that really sells these cars. And the more people who get them, the more people who want to share them with their friends and coworkers.
Okay. Let's talk about Tesla. And so certainly Tesla had a blip. It's kind of, or a, kind of a slowdown. That had definitely happened because Tesla explained it from their perspective. There's the economy, interest rates are high. These are, priced higher than the Chinese who are really going for the low end of the market. And then they've also, Model 3, Model Y have been around for a long time. They've grown so fast that they're now going to be growing slower. The growth rate is slower. But there is the new affordable models are coming out, or they planned about it. They're going to announce that. You got Robotaxi, you got Cybertruck. Tell me more what you're expecting to happen with Tesla's product pipeline.
EVs are exciting. They're the cutting edge. When you get something like Xiaomi hitting the market, it's a new, exciting car. The SU7 there's a lot of hype behind it, and early deliveries are getting great reviews. Something like that will cut into Model 3 sales absolutely and directly. Does that mean that Model 3 sales are over? No, there are people who just want the new hotness, whatever it is. We're also seeing some of that with the Cybertruck. There was a lot of pent-up demand, and now Rivian is having a real hard time selling trucks, and so is Ford. Does that mean Rivian and Ford are done? No, we're just in a Cybertruck hype cycle. I believe Cybertruck will survive better than the competition because they've figured out a way to manufacture it that appears to be less expensive than the competition. And the same with Tesla. While the SU7 is a fantastic car at a fantastic price, they've fully admitted they are losing money on every unit they sell. And there's a limit to how many units you can lose money on. Now, they will bring their cost down over time, but they may have to also increase the price. And once it's back on par with the Model 3, a little higher than the Model 3 even, that's when sales will normalize. So the lack of new models from Tesla is a valid concern. It's not a concern. It's a valid perspective. But Tesla doesn't need new models every day to still have the best car on the road because the cars are always changing under the skin. It's always getting better. And it's very unusual to own a Tesla that doesn't get some kind of substantial upgrade in the future over the air for free while you're asleep, where with other cars, that's still just not a thing. When you buy a product, you have a product, and that's your product. So we're going to see it. There may be lean months. I expect Model 3 sales in China to be lower because of the Xiaomi. And Xiaomi has been able to ramp production very, very quickly because they're using SAIC to manufacture it, a company with decades of manufacturing experience. They know what they're doing. They know how to ramp. So they're able to avoid some growing pains that way, but they do have to pay that middleman markup. So it'll long-term negatively impact their ability to reduce costs, at least on the scale that Tesla can. So I'm not very worried.
Okay. So Brian, I wanted to ask you this question. The Tesla recently revealed the environmental impact report. Many people noticed that they took out the sentence that they used to have in previous reports where they said that they're targeting 20 million vehicle sales per year. That is their ultimate goal, hoping to get there by 2030. Do you interpret that as A, that means Tesla has given up, they're not going to be able to get there anymore, or B, this has something to do with Robotaxi? What was your interpretation of that?
It's the latter. It has to do with the Robotaxi. 20 million was a milestone that they were looking to achieve when it looked like the future was people buying cars. I wouldn't want to be the last guy to build a gas station. And people are still building gas stations. It's mind-boggling. But similarly, I wouldn't want to be the last guy building new horse breeding farms during the end of that era. Cars are still going to exist. I'm confident. We are hunters, some of us, and the rest are gatherers. The gatherers will always want to own their thing. I am a gatherer, so you are safe for now. But the thing with that is, will we still need huge, huge volumes of people buying cars when robotaxis exist? When it comes to these huge fundamental shifts, things like AI, things like robotics, things like autonomy, it is impossible to see over the horizon. Those with sailboats who saw steam-powered ships coming thought, great, we'll be able to move people and cargo quicker. What they didn't see was that the entire world was about to change. And if you had targeted, I'm going to build 1,000 sailboats in the next 10 years, and the steam engine comes along, maybe don't build 1,000 sailboats.
Okay. Wanted to get your perspective on this question as well. So many people still believe, and they still think that you can't, if you're going to move to Robotaxi, right, autonomous vehicles, that you don't need an electric vehicle. So even though you have these forecasts for electric vehicle sales, if autonomy comes, and maybe it's not just Tesla, maybe there's others that come 3-5 years later, that they will make all cars, including maybe even the used cars. What's your perspective on that?
Well, do you mean that gas cars would be robotaxis?
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing with a robotaxi is you kind of need to start, it needs to be integrated. I guess you could add sensors to a car, but it feels like just like you could add a gasoline engine to your old carriage, you wouldn't. It just doesn't make sense. Could Ford build a gas-powered robotaxi? I guess, but the future's electric, and to make a new platform and design it to be 2 or 3 things is 2 or 3 times more expensive, and none of the individual projects would end up being as good as if you just built it to be one thing and do it right. So I don't imagine a future where these robotaxis from any brand will necessarily be gas. I suppose they could have a range extender that wouldn't be too silly, but it's still a bit silly.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't make sense, especially if it's robotaxi, if it's ride hailing, you want to have the business model, right? Where it's not only do you not have the driver, but you don't have the expense of gas. In fact, many Uber drivers today are realizing that I'm going to go ahead and lease a Tesla now because the price per month is less than what I would pay for gas. And that's already happening quite significantly. Uber has a partnership with Tesla to promote that, make drivers aware. So yeah, it doesn't make sense when people say that they're going to just, now make my gas cars autonomous, and that's what's going to change the game. We'll see what happens. What's your perspective of when will it take for Tesla? When do you expect the affordable car models to come out? When do you expect, of course, Robotaxi to actually be in full business? And what do you expect for a Cybertruck ramp to get to speed?
So the Cybertruck ramp is still moving at the pace we kind of expected. We saw a burst rate of 1,000 a week, but if you zoom out a little bit and look at the numbers, it looks like that is now a sustained figure at 1,000 a week. And we're still in the first half of the year. The original target that I had said of 90,000 for this year, I believe is still on track. I think next year will, of course, be significantly bigger, maybe twice the size, but it's hard to look that far out. That's 18 months, 19 months out. Then the question was, when will the affordable car come? Which one do you mean? If you mean the absolute compact, the real compact, it could be 2 years, 3 years for sure, I'd say. But for the Model 2.5, the scaled down Model 3 or Y that we may see as a robotaxi, that could be sooner. That could be less than 2 to 3 years. I think 2 would be the minimum, but 3 would be a lot more realistic because that vehicle is more of a repurposed 3. We could see it go up with the speed that we saw with the Model Y. The Model Y is a repurposed 3. It shares a lot of parts. It shares a lot of the drivetrain is the same. So the design philosophy and method of manufacturing is the same. So if they just scale down a 3 or Y and make that the first compact or robotaxi or both, we could see that we could see it in a year, but it would be pretty realistic to say we will see it on the road within 2.5.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate this. One of the best people to ask these questions, to show these tables. You know quite a bit about the competition, the electric vehicle sales, Tesla's products. Thank you so much, Brian. Follow him on his YouTube channel. Check him out there. Honestly, it is one of the best channels. You got to see some of his videos. Again, just the knowledge that he drops, and he travels and he goes and visits, site visits quite often. Go check him out, his YouTube channel at FutureAza. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.